Kia ora team, so I'm Adam Thompson. I am a nurseryman based in Cambridge in the Waikato. I am a bit of a self-taught hack, so there's a lot of very well educated, flash people in suits and people with lots of knowledge here today. I'm not one of those people, but I'm here to have a yarn about my journey, what I've learnt, and how we can share that information. So what I'm speaking today about is making it easy for farmers. The reason I say making it easy for farmers, so these are stats on our land use in New Zealand and what the different pieces of land are doing. And you can see there 40% of our land is in exotic grassland. So if we don't get the farmers on board, we can't affect the change of getting these native trees back in. Farmers are pragmatic people, they've got a lot of staid opinions, they're not that easy to convince on some things, and they're very economically driven. Pine forests and these carbon things that we've been talking about are obviously skewed towards, a lot of farmers will go that way from an economic sense. But what we discount is that farmers are really proud of their land. And farmers, often for them, that's their thing. They're passing it on to their generations. They are multi-generational businesses, a lot of them as well. So if we can get farmers on board, we can make a huge difference. And I want to talk about what we're doing as basically a bunch of farmers ourselves, country bumpkins from the Waikato, in terms of making a bit of a difference. So what are the barriers for farmers? So attitudes, that's a big one. And we've got a good story on our farm. We planted some area back to native 2 years ago, and the guy who bought the farm off, he's in his 80s now, said, Adam, I cleared the scrub off that land there about 50 years ago. I spent 40 years spraying gorse on it and I gave up, and it's good to see you putting stuff back into it. It should have never been cleared. So there are some generational issues around people and what they're doing. Ian Brennan, who's out here, is one of my neighbours, and we've got another neighbour between us who grazes every inch on his farm. But we're working on that to convince that, hey, there's actually productive areas and non-productive areas. So that real, like, hey, we can make $1 out of it. It's promising to hear James Shaw talking about, hey, there are actually other ways we can encourage the right type of behaviours. So that's one. Regulations. It was really interesting hearing TK talk earlier. I'm not sure he's gone, but we don't trust the government. Well, farmers don't trust the government either, and you just have to look at the He Waka Eke Noa stuff to go, they came out with something and the government's come back with something else. So a little bit like that Māori view of, hey, we've been screwed in the past, farmers also have that point of view. So it's not about something that's going to be legislated here out of Wellington, but actually about getting stuck in and sorting something out on farms. So, and then obviously a financial barrier. Every tree that we sell out the door, I reckon 80% of them, we did have a bit of a buddy poll on this, but not very scientific. Like I said, I'm a farmer hack from the Waikato. They're funded by some sort of government, central or local government funding. So we need to break down these barriers for basically to get farmers planting more trees. What do we do to make it easy? So this is the key thing, is looking at, hey, we need to engage these people. 40% of New Zealand's land, what do we need to do for them? So co-funding, Teresa Count's a prime example, regional, local government, central government funding is a real big thing. Simplicity, so I'm going to go on to talk about that. Like, there'll be some ecologists in the room who'll go, Adam, you can't restore native forests by going out and planting 10 species. We need 45 things out there. It's like, yeah, you bloody do. You need 100 things in that proper forest, but you need to start somewhere. And if we don't start and all we do is write reports and shout out from Wellington, we're not going to get shit done. So that's important from my point of view. We offer a full service in our nursery, so we think just trying to close the loop for farmers. Labour's a real challenge, knowledge is a real barrier. I see a lot of people buy plants, can't plant them properly, they sit around for too long or whatever, they waste money to get things done. So we need to make it simple, but ultimately we need to make it cost effective. I heard it said earlier that you can't make money out of a native plant nursery. We're a few years in, we're still working that out, but we need to find a way to basically keep that cost down, because if we say, hey, it's going to cost you $10 a plant to make it work, well, we're never going to get farmers to actually pony up with the cash. So what do we do? Scale. When I look at this, cool, there's a business. I've been growing native plants for 10 odd years. How do we scale that up to actually make it economical? We can't make a tree that we can sell for $2.50 if we're only growing 10,000 of them. We need to grow 1 million of them, So, and there aren't going to be that many people who can do that, but I don't think putting that in the hands of the central government, they're going to be able to grow it quite as efficient either. So that's what we're doing. We're keeping it simple with our varieties. I say 19 varieties. Most of it is a dozen varieties, would be 95% of our production, because we're out there taking care of that first stage, those first generation colonisers. Diversity and efficiency. So I come from a small business background, and so for us, getting people to go out and do manual labour, who here planted more than 100 trees this year? Cool. We're in a room of and you know how hard it is, right? And that's half a room of people who are massively committed enough to come to Wellington and pay to go to a conference. You know how difficult it is. So we need to encourage people to do it, because if you went down to any group in any town and said how many people here planted 100 trees in a year, out of every 100 people you're going to get 5 or something. So diversity and efficiency of making things work, and that isn't necessarily just a forestry crew, whether everyone looks the same and acts the same. It's about getting more and more people engaged. We've got school teachers, airline pilots, supermarket managers, these people on our team. I think if we're going to solve this problem, it's not about convincing the people in this room, it's about convincing those landowners, and I keep going back to it, we've got to convince the landowners, we've got to convince those communities to make it easy. So what have we done? We've planted roughly 1 million trees. We've grown roughly 1 million trees in the last 3 years. We've planted 500,000 of them ourselves. We've touched on 140 farms, which is great. A lot of these people have multi-year plans for what they're doing, so they're starting to make that change, but we need to encourage them. And I think this is the big challenge, is how do we encourage farmers to make that work? And we've worked on about 225 hectares. We had a bit of a tally up. So it's quite, it's amazing the change you can make just by getting stuck in and getting some shit done. So I think this is the real on the ground actually happening stuff. And I'm really enjoying coming here and seeing the other stuff that's going on that's superfluous to us when we heads down potting plants. So cost, this is the number one barrier. So I think in terms of busting myths, what does it cost? Bit of a ring around our competitors. We say $8 a tree planted. That'll include a spot spray, maybe a release. Some people are cheaper, some people are more expensive, and they're talking about the cost of diesel and labour and all the rest of it to actually get people to go and plant a tree. So if you do 4,500 stems per hectare, so roughly 1.5 metre spacings, $36,000 a hectare to establish native forest. I heard Don Carson speak on the country radio show, and he says it's too expensive, never compete with exotic forestry, it's rubbish. And that's what they're talking about, because that's great if you want to plant the wetland up your driveway, but you're not going to get a real change in your land use and taking out all of those marginal areas if you're going to spend that amount of money. So we're looking at a mixed re-veg approach. $5 a tree. I don't think anyone should be charging particularly any more than that, to be honest. And if you can't make money doing it that way, have a look at the business and their efficiencies. This is in the Waikato, so we appreciate we're not hard, stony, snow-prone, mid-Canterbury country, but for a lot of North Island areas, this approach here does work. We supply trees into other areas in the North Island, and I would say they're around $5. Are they, Aaron? Yes. Get a nod from that, which is great. We also reduce that density a little bit, because if you're growing the right species in the right place, you're going to get that fast colonisation. So if you bring it down 3,500 trees, it's going to be $17,500 a hectare. But what can we do better than that? And I call this the Ian Brennan model, which is large-scale afforestation using Manuka Kānuka with tōtara as a long-term species in it, giving that forestry option, but also giving some level of diversity in there of a fruiting species that is going to allow a long-term sustainable forest, providing you've got reasonable seed bank nearby. So 2,500 stems a hectare, roughly 2 metre spacings, 10% of that mix being tōtara long-lived species. Obviously harder to grow in a nursery situation, takes longer to get a decent size where you need good survivability. But chucking in relatively small forestry grade Manuka Kānuka at sort of 400 millimetres tall and smacking them in, we can get $11,000 a hectare. We've probably put in, next year we'll be putting in 25 or 30 hectares of that for farmers. And we want to do more because I think that's the way of the future, of getting more of this marginal land, getting on top of that soil erosion, and basically using the right areas on your farm for farming and intensification, and then being able to retire those other areas back. When I left Hamilton Airport this morning, a lot of gullies, and you see there's farming up to here, and then you still see cows down in these little gullies, and you think, just retire that. That's where your water's starting to flow out into your creeks and into the Waikato River. Like if we can make the most of those areas but farm those, we've got to pay our way. We've got to pay for our schools and hospitals. And I think if we can make it easy for farmers to do that, it'll make a big difference. So this is my vision of the future. This is like, when this photo is taken, we also owned the farm for about 3 years. This is on our farm, and you can sort of see it's a dry summer. There are some cattle there on the better grade country. We've actually retired the stuff that's steeped in the bottom there now. But we fenced out an area there. We've planted up the side of it back into native. We're cropping some of the better country. We're taking the wet areas out and planting them. And I think this is the future of farming. If there is chat of these biodiversity credits, as that stuff comes, if we can get a better deal for native planting in terms of ETS and other credits, we're going to have the opportunity there where, like on your farm, your revenue streams aren't just going to be meat, milk and wool. You'll be able to use, and hey, a mix of exotic forestry as well, but looking after that biodiversity. And I think just the farm of the future is going to look a lot different to what the farm of the past has. Like I say, I talk about mid-Canterbury again, big flat areas, all in pasture. And I know Maureen and I were talking about this earlier, that's a different model. I think we're going to see farmers, if we can make it easy for them to make those changes, the gains that if every farmer was able to retire the worst producing 5% of their land across 40% of the country's total land, we're going to get these 300,000 hectare type goals, and we're going to kick them easy as. So it's not just about the government land ownership, it's not just about Māori-owned land or big corporates, it's actually about every individual farmer making it easy for them, and we can collectively make a difference. So yeah, relatively short talk for me. I'm ahead of time, which is bloody good. Fire the recent questions, tell me I don't know what I'm talking about and that's too cheap. Whatever you want to tell me. Sam was telling me I had nice legs, thank you. But yeah, that's very much me. Have we got some questions?
Yeah, I've got a question for you.
Bloody good.
I've got choice paralysis, so I don't know where to sit.
Should we stand? Do we want to sit?
Okay, let's stand.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Okay.
Should we do a dance?
From what you see out there, what is the attitude of farmers to retiring their farmland into permanent native forests?
Yeah, cool. That's a good question. We see mixed reactions, and I think if you know a farmer, I don't know how many people in this room are farmers, but every farmer's different. But what we're seeing, we are really fortunate that we're dealing with more progressive farmers who are retiring land. They can see the change coming. They're really getting ahead of it. But like with anything, those old views are dying out. The farmers who thought that every bit of native scrub just needed to be gotten rid of, they're the ones who are selling up. They're dropping dead, and. Hey, it's not the worst thing that ever happened. It's just like they've done great, but it's like some of our racist undertones in society and all those things. Those people are getting older and their views don't work anymore. The ones that are coming forward and are progressive, we're actually seeing some really awesome progress being made. So I think there are a lot of my generation, and I know I look like I'm 25, but I'm 37, who are more focused on, like I say, that mixed income stream from a farm in the future, and that a farm's not going to look like just a monoculture of grass. It's going to have all those different things on it. So,
question coming through: do you have an alibi for when those farmers drop dead?
Yes, good point.
No, but actually, do have another question, kind of around that sort of monoculture space that you were just talking about. I feel like sometimes the tree space is similar to the fish space, where everyone knows the snappers of the world, and everyone knows the, Totoro, but what are we doing about diversifying the natives that we need to see in these spaces?
Yeah, awesome. So there's a reason that we are Restore Native and that there's a circular view to what we're doing. We're only there to get things started. Like, and I try and impress this on farmers. Cool, we're going to come and plant that bit of land you're retiring. We're going to do that this winter, awesome. But we're building a forest that's going to last forever. So the plant that we put in today is not going to be there necessarily in 100 years' time. So there are a reason why things like manuka and kānuka and cabbage trees and that are so well known. It's because they're bloody reliable. They're easy to grow, they're reliable, and like they do the job. But if you can get onto pest control and that sort of stuff as well, and planting the right species, the birds will do the work. So I talk about that unity that everything lives in. So the trees need the birds to disperse the fruit, and then the birds need the trees to grow the fruit. And we can create a forest like that, and that's how it works. So if we get on top of the pests, if we get the right species in there and the colonisers, we can make that magic happen. So yeah, it's not about just today. We can bring that diversity because it's there, and we need to look after it better in those seed sources. So.
Do you have any native fuchsias at your place?
We have called tukutuku. We don't have really cool little creepy things like that though. So creepy and cool don't normally go together.
Got another question coming through around, how do you make sure what's planted is maintained? Getting plants in the ground is one thing, maintaining them is another. Yeah, awesome. Really important. And every site has different challenges, right? So having a long-term view to what you're doing is really important. When I say offer a full service, I think that's really important. I love my trees, and I don't want to see them go out the door and have someone fuck it up. Like it needs to be done right. And to see them planted well, to see them looked after, to see the prep being done on site. Release spraying's the obvious one. Coming back in that spring, not having them swamped by grass is a great start. But if you're in a really weedy area, it's not about, hey, my funding says I need to get trees in this year. It's got to be about, hey, look, you need to control that privet, and you need to control the convolvulus and things like that before planting trees so that you can have that long-term success. And then you can't necessarily just shut the gate and walk away, because what if something gets in, whether it's weed species or pest animals or something, and buggers it up. So really important, like for us, is that ongoing, part of the service. And I think for every landowner is to make sure that, but then if they're never going to go back to it, you need to make sure you're putting in the stuff that is going to survive, It's not about one solution for everyone, but it's about finding something that's reliable. So. I've got another question that's kind of about the other end of things. The planting is one thing, the maintaining is another, the seeds.
Yeah, cool.
Do you eco-source seed?
Yeah. So we do eco-source seed, and this is an interesting topic. So I'm really big on eco-sourcing the long-term forest. For us, Miro, kahikatea, being in the Waikato, real prominent species, pukatea, tawa, they're going to be there forever, more or less, much longer than our lifetime. And I think that's really important. Do I think that you need to have an eco-source manuka in your area that's only going to last for 25 odd years? Is that really that important? Or do you want really good, reliable, fast establishing species? So that's my own point of view. There'll be some people who go, Adam, you're a muppet, mate. But honestly, what matters to me is that we get your forest started off well, and that long term you've got the right stuff in there. So like I say, it's not doing today. We've got to think about that long term view. So.
Awesome. Kia ora, Adam. Thank you so much for your time today.